And thank you guys for joining me on the last segment of today's show, going over to a team that we haven't really talked about too much, at least in regards to last weekend, because I tried to forget about it. But the Steelers season, I thought, after what I saw on, what was it, Saturday, I thought the Steelers season peaked on December 8th. On December 8th, when they had just beat the Cleveland Browns to go to 10-3, leading the AFC North, playing as good as I ever would have thought they would be playing this season, with Russell Wilson and the offense looking comparable, very capable of putting up like 24, 25, 30 points in some of these games. Now, knowing what I know now, it looks like that was the peak of it all, and now we're very much in the decline. We're very much free falling still heading into these playoffs. The Steelers are, they couldn't have imagined a worse scenario to be heading into the playoffs than where they currently find themselves at this point. You couldn't tell me that they wouldn't win. You couldn't tell me at that point on December 8th that they wouldn't win this division or at least be anywhere lower than the fifth seed. I couldn't imagine such a collapse from them over the last couple weeks here, but as of today, where we stand right now, a month later, I might add, a month later here on January 8th, after December 8th, a month later, and how the Steelers have gone from, there was all the conversation about the Steelers being a legit contender, being in a spot where they could compete with anybody in the AFC with how they were playing, to now being considered one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the playoffs, is insane. The Steelers being 3 days away from playing Baltimore again, also after losing their last 4 games, to me really couldn't get worse. Because to me, all that says is they're struggling right now, and now they're gonna get beat up by their arch rival, their sibling in a sense, right? In a sort of analogy, right? They're gonna culminate this entire season. The icing on the cake is going to be Baltimore beating them at home once again and just kicking them out of the playoffs, right? That is something that I think a lot of people are legitimately considering is going to happen on Saturday. Everywhere I look, everyone's picking the Ravens, and rightly so. I think right now they're like 9.5 or 10.5 favorites at home against the Steelers. That's even still without Zay Flowers. It doesn't look like Zay Flowers is going to play in this game. It looks like with that knee injury, at least it's going to keep him out of the wild card round. So even still with that, the Ravens are heavy favorites going into this game. And it all really got to a low point this past Saturday in their 19-17 loss to the Cincinnati Bengals, where that was Pittsburgh's fourth straight game where they lost, and they failed to exceed 17 points. Again, in just last month, right before that December 8th game, where they were scoring, like, they had scored like 40-something against the Bengals. They just finished scoring 27 against the Browns. They put up 20-something against the Commanders and won on the road. It was looking pretty decent, right? They already beat the Ravens once this year, I should say. And now to be in this situation, right, where you're struggling to put up 17 points is not even close to all of the problems that this team has as of right now. Going back to that Saturday day game before we kind of expand it out a little bit more, in that game where Cincinnati, obviously you knew needed to win, and they had a fantastic offense. They have a fantastic offense, right, with T. Higgins, Joe Burrow, and Jamar Chase, right? Not a lot of teams can say they held the Bengals to 19 points. Almost nobody did. The only team to kind of hold them to that, point mark was the Philadelphia Eagles halfway through the year. Nobody else was able to hold the Bengals under 20 points, really. And the Steelers did. If you had told me the Steelers were going to hold the Bengals to 19 points somehow with how they were playing, I would have told you there's no way the Steelers put up anything less than that against a Bengals team that all year we've been talking about being the reason why they stink. Everybody points to the fact that this defense is hurting Joe, is hurting this offense. If it wasn't for this defense playing so bad, the Bengals would be one of the best teams in the AFC. Everything was pointed at this defense. So, for the offense that was so good coming into this game to score only 19 points, and for the Steelers offense to have an opportunity here to at least get one win against the defense that was considered so bad, and to put up less than 19 points is just like the worst case scenario. Again, I keep using it, the icing on the cake for this last 4 to 5 game stretch for the Steelers, where it was such a litmus test to kind of see where they were, to be considered real contenders. You already beat the Ravens, right, going into this game, but you had games against the Eagles, which you kind of had an opportunity in, against not the Chiefs, but against the who was it? I can't even remember now. The Ravens was one game. You were playing them again in Baltimore. You even had an opportunity to win that game and potentially sweep them. Against the Eagles, like I mentioned, and even the Bengals, right? In a must-win scenario, you had an opportunity to win almost all of those games, dare I say, because even though the Eagles game, the final score might not reflect it, there was a point in that game when it was 20-13, and the Steelers had the ball and they were driving, and it looked like they had some sort of momentum, but there was that fumble by Najee Harris, and that really killed off the game from that point on. Then the following week against the Ravens, it was 17-24 after Lamar Jackson had just thrown an interception, and you find yourself now with this second life in that game where you're only down 7 points somehow without George Pickens, and you have an opportunity to at least tie the game, and then you throw that pick six, and then that game's already done with, right? You're going to lose that game. And even last night, where the offense, or not last night, but last Saturday, where the offense throughout the entire game was so bad, right? It was so bad that I don't know how they even scored that one touchdown to Pat Freiermuth, but they barely even scored that. And to still have an opportunity to go win that game was all, again, thrown out the window with an awful 2-minute drive where just bad decisions from Russ, just wasting a lot of time, unnecessary time, and the play calling was also another problem that was just reflected on Saturday's game as well. And that the worst part of all three of those games was that it legitimately made me think that, at one point in all those games, I thought the Steelers could maybe win this game and pull one out of nowhere. But like they did in all three of them, they crashed and burned and disappointed me in each one of those games. So now heading into these playoffs, right, you look around everywhere else at all the teams, right? You want to talk about all the teams, and not just the AFC, but also the NFC. We're not going to compare them to any of the division winners because, they're obviously not to that level. But then you look at the wild card teams, right? You look at the Chargers. They're playing at a whole different level now. It looks like everything's clicking for them. They've won their last 3 games going into the playoffs, so they're obviously playing better than the Steelers. The Broncos just had a huge win at home, blowing out the Chiefs and making the playoffs for the first time in 10 years. Then you go over to the other side. I mean, the Steelers don't compare to the Vikings. The Commanders, have a rookie sensation at quarterback. They're feeling great about this first season with their rookie quarterback. So the Steelers, again, the way they're playing right now, don't really compare to the Commanders either. And then you look at the Packers where, they could have had an opportunity to be the 6th seed, but even still, the way that their offense operates with Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur calling the plays, still, with what I saw from the Steelers, I don't even think it comes close to that. And the team that I think would even be close to how bad the Steelers are playing would be the Houston Texans. And, they've won the division already. And, they're just in a better spot, in a more favorable position to move on in these playoffs than the Steelers. So, are the Steelers the worst team in this playoffs? It's hard to argue against that. As much as I don't like saying it, it just feels like it is. Now with this challenge ahead of you, going into Baltimore again and the way they're playing, they just pretty much shut out the Texans and they just destroyed the Cleveland Browns too. it's hard to imagine any sort of scenario where the Steelers can at least compete on that offensive side of the ball. And then defensively, last time there was a lot of miscommunications and, just mental errors on that point. They kind of cleaned it up against the Bengals, but it's just hard to say right now where the Steelers team can go. And in terms of them being one and done this year, it's looking like it. If like, say we're betting on it and we're taking the odds on them being one and done and winning this game, we're talking about plus 600, 700 for them to win this game, and then kind of minus 200 for them to go home after the first round, right? It's that bad, I think, because, we're not going to get into it now, but the play calling hasn't been great. The offensive line hasn't looked any better at all, really, this year. There's been moments where it looked all right, but over the last couple weeks, Russell Wilson's been sacked too much. He's not going to break out any real long runs consistently. And, like I mentioned, the play calling isn't great. I know what the Steelers are running on first and second down. I know it's going to go run, probably another run, and then on third down, it's 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, or maybe 3rd and 11 because you lost yards already, and then you try to pass, it goes incomplete because you don't really target the middle of the field, and then it's that same sequence for almost all the entirety of the game. And it doesn't help that George Pickens is really your only target, and the way that he played last week, there's really no other guy to go to. Honestly, in terms of wide receivers, you could go to Pat Freiermuth, but he's not about to go take over a game. They've just never seen that from him. So there's a lot of problems with this offense, right? If it's not clicking with George, then they almost have no answers, right? Because the running game's been hit or miss, really, but it's not really been so consistent for them to rely on it thus far. So it looks like, coming up until this game on Saturday against the Baltimore Ravens, despite their injuries, it looks like the Steelers are heading towards a one-and-done season again. And what that means for them going into the offseason, it's crazy. We're already talking about the offseason with them. But, that's how it looks like right now, right? There's no real legitimate kind of argument to make in their favor other than the fact that it's a division game, right? And all those sort of things said about that. But I don't know. It's hard to believe it as of right now. But I would like to know what you guys think about that. Are you more optimistic about the Steelers than I am? Or are you even more down on them than I am? So leave your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. But with that being said, and that rant already over, we have come to the end of today's show. I want to thank you guys for joining me for today's episode, and a reminder to you guys to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. Check out the Sports Network channel and the Podcast Network channel on YouTube, where you can find more of the Chip Shot Football podcast on there and more of these live shows, more breaking news, more coverage around the NFL, and breakdowns, previews, and all that sort of stuff around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you guys again for joining me. Make sure to come back tomorrow at the same time, where we're going to start discussing the wild card weekend coming up this upcoming weekend. So I'll see you guys hopefully back here again tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. 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 Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to